Good evening, ladies.
How are you?
Thank God.
Oh, Hashem. It's still daytime by you, Kabbalah? Meaning,
Just
it's
getting
not.
dark.
It's
Just getting dark now.
Here is dark, completely dark.
Okay, so I see we're in the middle of Bet Yosef, I think, somewhere. Okay, let's see what it says. Anyway, so it says Gama Rosh Katav. Even the Rosh says Yesh says that Yesh Mefarshim ki echi de hafsaka moelet tetzoah. Some explain that just like interruption helps with excrement, achinami moelet recha. It also helps you with bad smell as well. Rabbeinu Moshe Katav kivan she'ariach magia. I think we did this. We did this already. I'm sorry. Yes, we're going to the next one, which is Gimel. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so we'll do the tour first, and then we'll go back to the Bet Yosef. So it says in the tour, Chatzek Tana shenifratza b'imloa ligdola. So you have two courtyards, right? And one was totally broken, breached to the one small one was breached to the big one. So the big one is like larger, so it's like there's still some planks left there, on the walls, which are not demolished on the big one. Mikol tzad, from both sides, it's like that. There's like overreach there. So the rule is like this: if the excrement is in a big courtyard, you're not allowed to read in a small one. Why is that? Because the small one is like a subsidiary of the bigger one. But if it's in the small one, the excrement, you can read in the big one. Why? Because the big one is not subsidiary of the small one. What's the reason why? Because it has those side walls, flanks, which are still left there. So therefore, it's separate from the other domain, the smaller one. But the smaller one is not really separate from the big one. Why? Because it's totally breached on one side. So this is the picture of this whole thing. Okay, so let's see the Bet Yosef. What does it say about this? It says, it brings you the source, right? Pashut bepek kol gagot eruvin. It's in Eruvin Tzadik Bet Amud Aleph. V'tama de milta. So it says the reason for this is what? The ktana, the small one, kivan shenifratza b'imloa l'gedola. Just like we said, right? Since the smaller one is totally breached into the big one, la chashiva bait. It's not considered to be really a house, whatever you want to call it, right? Private domain, whatever. B'fnei atzma by itself, aval hagdola. But the bigger one, kivan shekotelea odefin al shem ktana, since it still has some overreach, right? On the sides, some walls are left over there. Mitzad zeh from both sides, as we mentioned. Chashiva kabait b'fnei atzma. So therefore, it's considered to be like a domain to itself. So it says from here, it seems like we can deduce that if you have if you have a tzo'ah in front of the doorway, mutar likrot bebait, so then you can read inside the house, as we said. Even if you see it, even if it's within 4 amot. Like we wrote already close by, בשם הראש, the name of the rosh. So he says, because here that's what we're dealing with, because he sees it, or is not distant from it 4 amot. Because if not so, even if he is with the tzo'ah, the beit echad in one room, shara, it's allowed. But nevertheless, when you have tzo'ah, the excrement, in the small one, mutar likot bigdola, you can still read in the big one. So he says, you have to say that the reason is because since that the it's in a separate place, separate domain, that's small by itself. So therefore we can say right, it's a holy domain there, whatever as we require. Okay, very good. So that's the bit Yosef. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch Gimel. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, as we said, right, if you have a small courtyard which was totally breached into the large one, and the large one is has overreach on both sides, right? In other words, there's more walls there on both sides. So therefore, what happens is that the smaller one is not considered to be a domain by itself because it's totally breached into the big one. But the big one, since the walls are overreaching on both sides, so it's considered to be a domain by itself. Yukach says, therefore, if you have excrement in the big one, you can't read Kriyat Shema in the small one. Unless you go away from there 4 amot, as we said, right, or whatever, depending on if it's in front of you or in back of you, as we said. But if there's excrement in the small one, you can read in the big one, without distancing yourself. Why? Because it's a separate domain. If there's no bad smell coming there, that's the condition. Okay, any questions if you have, let me know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead to Dalet. So we'll go back to the tour now. So it says in the tour, Soat Kelev V'Chazir. If you have excrement that comes from a dog or a pig, whatever, animals in general, Ve'im yesh b'hem orot or az dinam kedin tzoat adam. So if there's hide in there, it's like the same thing as excrement of man. The inyan al-hakaf when it comes to distancing. Ve'im en b'hem orot, but if there's no hide there, habek tzoat sh'ar behema. So then it's any other animal, like any other mammal. Chayav be'of or a bird. Shemutar likrot etzlam. You can read next to them miyad right away. Ben im hu lefanav im o leacharav. Whether it's in front of you and back of you, im en bareach. If it doesn't have smell, it's okay. Ve'im yesh bareach. But if it has bad smell, marchik ad makom sheichle areach. So then you should go as far as away as it takes that the smell should end. Okay, that's the tour. Let's see what you said. Says Bet Yosef, Tzoat Kalev v'Chazir. Besov Perek Misha Meto, right over there. It's in this Perek. Tanya, Lo Ikra Adam Kriyat Shema, Keneged Tzoat Adam. So it says, right in the Braita, that a person shouldn't hear Kriyat Shema in front of the excrement of people. Lo Keneged Tzoat Kelavim, and also not the excrement of dogs. Lo Keneged Tzoat Chazrim, and also pigs. Lo Keneged Tzoat Tarnagolim, and also chickens. But afterwards it says, Amar Rava, it says, the Rava said, Let hilchata ki hai matnita. We don't pass like this is Braita. Ela ki ha Tanya, rather we pass like this one, this the Braita. Lo ikra adam kriyat shema, lo keneged tzoat adam, lo keneged tzoat chazirim. The person should read kriyat shema whether it's in front of excrement of people or right animals, as we said, the pigs. Lo keneged tzoat klavim, and the dogs is mentioned a ton orot letochan. That's only if there's hides in there. Rashi explains the netinat orot lo kae ela atzuat klavim b'chazrim. So he says when it comes to putting hides in there, it's only done with the excrement of dogs and pigs. About tzuat adam, but when it comes to people, the lo netinat orot nami asur. Even without putting hide in there, it's still forbidden. V'chen dat kol poskim. All the poskim agree with that. Okay, so then it goes on. Ve'im yesh ba mash katav im yesh ba reach marchik ad makom sheichle reach. And that which he said that if there's smell there, though, if it smells, you have to go away until the smell ceases. So he says, it seems like we learned this from the din of the rotting carcass. It's going to be explained close by. So according to that, right, you have to go as far as away as the smell ends. That he wrote, Rabbeinu, the tour, Lav Dafka, it's not precise. The truth is, you have to go 4 amot away further after the smell already has ended. Like it's going to be explained at the end of the siman. Good. So we're done with that. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Says Shulchan Aruch. Tzoat kiled v'chazir, right? If you have excrement from a dog or a pig, im natan bahem orot. If you put hides in there, right? Marchikim mahem kemo mitzvot adam. So then it's the same thing as the din of excrement of humans, right? So just to remind you, right, what we said yesterday, what's the point of putting hides in there? Because they used to process the leather with that, right? That's the way it was done in those days. Today, we have better ways of doing it, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have better alternative methods of doing it today. That's why in those days, whoever had this profession, right, of producing leather, he was always like a smelly guy, because he was always his body was always touching this stuff, his hands especially, so he was assumed to be like the smelliest guy in the neighborhood, so some women, couldn't even marry him because he was so smelly. So that's the way it was in the old days. This was a very strange profession, right? In the old days. Today, I think Baruch Hashem, we don't have a situation like this. Today, the leather smells good. Everything smells good. Baruch Hashem, everything is nice. Okay, whatever. But anyway, right? So it says if it doesn't have hides in there, so then it's going to be like any other animal or bird. You only have to go as far away as the smell ends. If they do have bad smell, so then it's like human excrement. So in other words, bottom line is that we're more lenient when it comes to animals, right? So what does that mean? Once the smell, but if there is no smell, no problem, right? You can read right in front of it. I remember one time it was strange, something that stays in my mind. One time, there's a park over here in my neighborhood. It's called Flushing Meadow Park. It's a famous park. The World's Fair was done there, many years ago. Right? There was a World's Fair there, whatever. So anyway, right, that park is interesting because what do you call it? A lot of people go there to exercise and stuff. So one time I went there with my friend, and we just were there. And all of a sudden, a bunch of birds came by, some I don't know, they look like seagulls, I don't know, something, big birds. And they just they were all over the place and they dropped excrement all over us, not on us, but on the ground there, So I was watching, oh my God, look at this. They made a whole toilet out of us over here. God, God help us. Right? Excuse my candor. So, but then I realized, this is animal, so you're allowed to read Kriyat Shema there with this, as long as you don't smell it. Even though you can see it, right? That doesn't change anything. So that's the way. It's a funny story. Anyway, right? That's the way it is with the animals, as we said, right? But there is the exception. The exception is that if they're using them to make hides, today I don't think you're going to find this today. Probably doesn't exist anymore, unless you go to some third world country, maybe, whatever, right? I don't think you're going to find it. Okay. So that's the story there. That's Dalet. Let's go to Hey and Vav together. Now we're going to different animals, right? We have all kinds of animals here. Okay, so let's go to the tour, see what it says. Right, so it says like this, right? If you have Tzoat Hamor Haraka, right? What is this? It's excrement which comes from a donkey, right? In those days, donkeys were very common, all over the place, right? So if it's soft, right? After it already traveled somewhere, and it's soft. Also, what about the cats, right? Nemiyah, right? Nemiyah is like some kind of a marten or something. One of those animals, right? It's like a weasel kind of thing. The nevela masrachat, and also another thing, right? What about a rotting carcass, right? So we talked about this yesterday a little bit, right? What about rotting stuff? What's the din with that, right? So he says all these things that we mentioned now, they're all like human excrement. So what does that mean? You have to write the distance from it. Melo enough. If you're in front of it, as long as you can't see it. If it's in back of you, then 4 amot from the place where smell stops. So you see, right, that there are certain animals that have a different type of excrement, but besides these, they're all pretty much the same, as we mentioned in the last halakha. So you see from there, right, the cats are not so good, right, when it comes to this. And by the way, you can smell this. If you go to somebody's house, right, who has cats, the house always smells bad. It's like, it's a given, like God. Even though they have like a litter box, all this stuff, but still, usually it's a smelly house. It's not a good place to be. Okay. Especially if there's carpets there. Oh my God. It gets absorbed into the carpets, the smell, Terrible. Okay, so that's the story with that, right? This is one of the reasons why you don't want to have really, animals in the house, as we said, right? If you have animals, better to have them, in the yard. Why put them in the house? It's not a very clean way to live. Okay, whatever, right? That's a different story. I'm not going to talk to you about that right now. But anyway, right? As we said, different animals have different kinds of laws. But most animals, right? In most cases, the rule is that as long as you don't smell it, it's okay. Okay, let's look in a bit, Yosef. So it says in Bet Yosef, where does this come from? It's in Yerushalmi, right? Perek Gimel, Halacha Hey, in Brachot. Katvu Arosh Sham. It says the Rosh, Marchikin Miglale Behema Dal Damot, right? So it says, when it comes to the excrement of the animals, we have to go away 4 amot. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachasda Amar, this rabbi says, Birkaim, right? Like one knee, whatever, that, right? Beshel Chamor. So that's only, I'm sorry, no, I didn't say it right. Again, one more time, right? Let's start this from the beginning, this whole thing. There's the Yerushalmi, right? So as we said, this comes from the Yerushalmi, and the Rosh brings it down, as we said, right? What does it say there? It says like this: Marchikin miglale behema. We have to distance from the dung of the animals. Dalad amot, right? The 4 amot. That's the first opinion. Rab Shmuel bar Chazda Amar, right? Berakim, right? So he says it's talking about soft excrement, right? As opposed to hard, obviously. He says that's only with donkeys. So you see, right, that soft of the donkey is something unusual. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar uveba bin aderech. He says that's also another condition, which is that it's after it came from traveling the donkey. But Levi said, Marchikin mitzvat chazir dal amot. He also brings there the pigs 4 amot and mitzvat nemiyah, also the nemiyah, which is some kind of a marten or whatever, the weasel, whatever, God knows. As we said, like a weasel. Dal amot, also dal amot from that one. Mitzvat tarnagolim, also from the chicken's excrement, dal amot, 4 amot. So all of them are 4 amot, according to Yerushalmi here. Right? Amar Yosef Barabin, it says, the rabbi says, Beshem Rab Huna, Bilvad be'adomim. So he says that's only with red. Right? So I'm assuming he's talking about red chickens. Rabbi Yirmiyah Beshem Rabbi Zera Amar, he brings another thing, right? Which is that Nevela shemasrachat dalad amot. Also, if you have a carcass which is rotting, that's also 4 amot. Got to go away. So you see from here, right, that rotting meat is also a problem, as we mentioned yesterday, right? And of course, that would also include like a corpse, You got to be careful with that too. That reminds me, I have to tell you, it was something incredible. One time, I was living in this building before I got married, we're talking like 30 years ago plus, 35 years ago. So what happened was that all of a sudden, it starts to be like a bad smell in the house, So we were looking for something, maybe something is rotting, whatever. When I feel a bad smell in the house, I always go to look at the potatoes, because usually they're rotting or whatever, old potatoes or something like that, right? Whatever, I get this indication. So couldn't find anything, right? We looked around here, there, and it kept on going for like a few days like that, but it was like on and off, like, sometimes yes, sometimes no, on and off. So we couldn't figure it out, what's going on, like we looked over the whole apartment, we couldn't see what's happening. So guess what happened, right? That a few days later, turns out, right, that There was some old guy, who was living by himself downstairs, and he died. And it was coming up from his apartment. Can you imagine? The smell was coming up. Nobody found his corpse. So he was lying there for like, I don't know, a week or whatever. Like that. Can you imagine to die that way? It's terrible. But anyway, right? The smell was coming up all the way, like from the third floor, like 5 floors up. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. They finally found the guy, and they told me. And I said, and I knew who he was, so like, God, I was, Now so you see, right? The dead body, corpse also is a problem, So a rotting carcass and a dead body is the same thing, right? Basically, it's the same thing. You're talking about rotting flesh, right? Which is not a good thing to smell. Whoever has experienced that, right, knows that can be pretty nasty. This can also happen, by the way. I'm sorry, you were saying something?
Rabbi, isn't for human even more stricter, right?
Could be. I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know. Who told you this?
And I mean, like, I know, like, regarding, like, for Kohanim in the cemetery, it's not only, like, Dal and Amod, but also, like, a fence. That's how, like, I would maybe connect.
Yeah, that's not because of the smell. That's because of the tumah. That's something else.
Oh, something else. Okay.
You understand? Tumah. That's impure. That's spiritual stuff.
All right.
So what happens is like this, right? That when you go to a cemetery, okay, like it's full of graves, right? So if you go inside the fence, usually you're going to become tameh. So if you're a kohen, you can't go in there. You know what I mean? There's no way to go in. There are some ways they solve that problem sometimes, but whatever. But anyway, right? So what happens is like this, that if you're outside the fence, though, the rule says halakha, that the tumah doesn't reach outside the fence, even though the grave is right next to the fence. Doesn't come out of the fence. So the fence guards the tumah. That's the thing. So, and by the way, that applies even if it's like a, you can see through it. Like, you can see through it, but it's still a fence, right? Like, let's say it's made out of barbed wire or whatever, metal stuff, like metal wire or whatever. It's still a fence. So, it guards from tumah, from impurity. So the solution is, right, if a kohen wants to go to Kivrei Tzadikim, he has to be outside the fence, and he can go. Then he can go, no problem. As long as he's outside there. So yeah, that's the way it works. That's why, a lot of the it's funny, a lot of the big rabbis that pass away, since a lot of people want to come to his grave, and pray there, what they do is they put him next to the fence. This way the kohanim can also come and pray there. This is what they did with Maran, Maran Ravadiya. They put him right next to the fence, So this way, if you're a kohen, you can go right there. You're right next to him, you see the grave. But it's okay because you're outside the fence. That's the way it works. But here, right, what are we talking about? We're talking about the smell, right? So that's the issue here, It's a physical issue. Okay, whatever. But anyway, right, that's just, so rotting flesh, right, is a problem. That's what we're saying. Bottom line. As opposed to, right, what I said yesterday, right? If it's just like, let's say you have some kind of a chemical, that's, giving off a smell. That's the rabbis never decreed on things like this. You know what I mean? Let's say, it's like tar or something that doesn't smell good. The rabbis never decreed you can't pray, in places like that. We don't find that. We only find with excrement, and things which are rotting. Excrement, by the way, is also rotten, right? That's the whole point, right? Why does it smell bad? Because it's rotten. That's the whole point, right? So the whole concept is that something that rots always gives off a bad smell, which the rabbis don't want you to pray with that smell. Okay, very good. So it goes on, right? Amar Rabbi Chanina, right? It says Rabbi Chanina, matnitin omeret ken kama yarchik mehem. So he says, the Mishnah says, how much you have to go away from them? Uminat so'a, and from the excrement, dal amot, 4 amot. Amar Rabbi Samlai, right? It says this rabbi, tipater b'mishra shel kovasin. So he said that's talking about the water of the laundry water, right? So whatever. Amar Rabbi Mani im b'mishra tanina v'lo b'mayim hara'im. Right, so that's the story we learned from a different from a different place. We learned that. So in other words, there's also another concept which is brought down in Talmud, which is that if you have like water which is like turbid, and it was used for all kinds of things, like laundry, right? And it smells really bad, like turbid water, smelly water. Also, the rabbi said regarding that you shouldn't read there, right? Regarding this kind of water. Okay, very good. So these are things that they decreed on, right? More or less. And so where are we getting this from? This is from the Yerushalmi, right? So the halacha here is a little bit different than what we see in the Babli. But anyway, right, he brings this because of the halacha that we learned here, which is coming from there. So it goes on to say here, Katav Rosh, right? Mitoch Yerushalmi. He says it from Yerushalmi Azeh. The Rosh says, you learn from this Yerushalmi, Mashma de en tzarich le'archik mitzvot behema ela b'chamor. Only the issue of the chamor, right? You have to go away from animals, excrement of animals. Keshba min haderech. And that's only if it came on the road, off the road, right? Just get off the road. Udelo ke Rabbeinu Moshe. So it says it's not like Rabbeinu Moshe, which is the Rambam. Shelo hitir ela keneged meraglaim shel behema, because he was only matir when it comes to the urine of the animals. V'yesh omrim shetzarich le'archik mitzvat hachatulim. Some say also you got to be careful about cats, right? As we already just mentioned that. Because cats have a bad smell. The excrement. They have they're bad, right? Okay. So it's the same like the weasel or whatever. So then why does it mention the nemiah, this weasel in Yerushalmi? Because they were accustomed to betoch habayit. They used to come into the houses. Can you imagine these things? Oh, wow. Oh, I see. Okay. So it seems like they used to keep them in the house. That's the whole thing, right? So it's just like we have now cats. Ad kan shano. The Gama Rabbeinu Yona says also Rabbeinu Yona lamad mirushalmi. He also learned from Yerushalmi zeh. Yerushalmi she'eno asur likot keneged shum tzuat behema. So he says also the same thing, right? That only all the excrement of animals is okay. Ela b'chamor abba min haderech. Only the donkey is a problem, right? As we said, sheyesh letzoato reach ra harbe, because the excrement is very smelly. Aval shar behemot, but so when it comes to other animals, even though they do have some bad smell, right? I mean, you can't say it's like totally, pure. It's not like you're smelling a bar of soap, But so what happens is like this, right? Once it comes out of the animal, the smell is not so bad anymore. You know what I mean? So in other words, it's not so intense like the like the human. So it says you're allowed to read Kriyat Shema right in front of the excrement of these animals. But what about the cat? Since it has a very bad smell, so it's like the weasel. So again, right, he says that Rabbeinu Moshe, who's the Rambam, only allowed the urine of the animals. So in other words, he's saying that when it comes to the excrement of the animals, he was more stringent, right? We didn't see that yet, by the way. He didn't bring that yet in the Bet Yosef, but the Rosh is bringing it here. Okay, interesting. So the Rosh says something interesting, right? Why was the Rambam? It's a wonder. Why was the Rambam so stringent about the excrement of animals? And he didn't even allow even even their excrement. Because in Yerushalmi it says it's okay. Right, the excrement of animals. So what happened? The Rambam didn't see the Yerushalmi? Why didn't he pick up on that? That's what the Rosh is asking, right? Shari Yerushalmi, right? So even though he says in this Yerushalmi, shemarchikim mitzvot chazir v'lo. And he did say about the pig, right? That you have to be careful to go away from that. V'lo chilek ben yesh betocha orot. He didn't really mention the issue of having right the hide in there or not. Le'en or not. Kevan she'asik Rabba b'gemara didan. So since the Rabbah concludes in our Gemara, so what does that mean? The Babli, right? We go like the Babli more. So in our Gemara, Rabbah says, "Halacha the halacha is like the Rabbraita. It's only forbidden if you put hides in there, right? When it comes to the pig. So therefore, it says the Rosh. That's how we paskin, right? We paskin like the Babli. Okay, so there's more to do here. It says, right, Katav Rashba, right? It means the Rashba here. B'Shema Rabad, name the Rabad. Shalom Emru Efrashim Alalu Ela Beyevashim. So it's these differences, he says, were only said regarding dry excrement. About Berakim, when it comes to moist, Kulam Asum, he says they're all forbidden. Wow. Another opinion. Okay. So Kulam Asum. Who Zal Katav She'eno Mechabar Benai. So he says, right, that the Rashba has said himself, he doesn't hold by the Ravad, you know, he doesn't hold by his opinion. So he says, because he says the excrement of the animals, right, it says they were soft, only the donkey is the problem. Right? Only if it came from the road. So you see right that there, from there, you see that when it comes to the other ones, the other animals, even if it's soft, it's okay. This is what he says. It says, brought down the Orchot Chaim. This was the Rashba, right? So now he brings in the Orchot Chaim. Oh, asur, right. I was thinking about this, by the way. Why is it, right? He brings you here a good point, a good distinguish. It's a good way to distinguish between one and the other, right? What's the bottom line? Why do we differentiate between this one and that one? So he says the reason is because what? So he says the general rule is that any animal which eats bread, right? Asur dikol keneged suato. So then it's going to be a problem, right? You can't read the Shema. So what does that mean? Eating bread, right? When a person eats bread, this is what gives them a smelly excrement. So he says, like dogs and like pigs, but it says whatever doesn't eat any bread, you're allowed. This is basically right the differentiation. So this is what he says. Oh, so he says, you know what? When it comes to the Rambam, he says, I don't think the Rambam was forbidding everything from every animal, every excrement. Only the ones that have a bad smell. That's what he meant. Because this is the language of the Rambam. It says over there, that when it comes to the excrement of people and dogs, and pigs, as we said, right? As long as they have hides in there, the whole also any kind of excrement that has bad smell. That's what he says, right? So you see, the Rambam is saying only if it has bad smell. Like these, asur, then it's bad, then it's forbidden. Also, it says the urine of the people. So when it comes to the urine of the animals, right, we can read, no problem. They don't smell bad, apparently, right? Go figure. Okay. Adkan, very nice. So that's the language of the Rambam. So it says Maran, right, with Yosef, you see from there that the Rambam only forbade when the tzoah has a bad smell. But if it doesn't have bad smell, he doesn't forbid. Right, so he says, but right, the Rosh and the Rabbeinu Yonah, they understood the Rambam differently, right? That they understood the Rambam to mean that all animals are forbidden, except urine, right? But it says it seems like they didn't really understand the language of the Rambam properly. Something was misunderstood there. The Lefish Katav Keneged Meragle Adam Asur, because since he wrote that the urine of the people is forbidden, Katav Keneged Meragle Behema Mutar. That's why he said that the urine of the animals is allowed. So when it comes to the excrement of animals, he already said, right, that it's only a problem when the smell is bad. Okay. So it seems to me, he says, right, that it's possible to say that that which Rambam didn't write, that you have to go away from, right, the issue of the rotting carcass, right? Why didn't he write that? For some reason, he left it out, the Rambam. So he says, so he says, you know why? Because it's really considered to be the same thing as excrement. So I guess he means to say, right, that as you know, what's the difference between rotting meat and rotting excrement, right? The same rotten excrement. The whole point is it's rotting, you know, so it's the same idea. So I guess he means to say, right, that he felt that it was already included in that category. So he didn't itemize it by itself. Says that now you, right, the question that they asked about the Rambam comes off. Haravad, the Ravad, what he asked about the Rambam. Why did he leave out this thing in Yerushalmi, that urine of the donkey, which came from the road, the tzot tarnagolim, and also the excrement of the chickens, aduma, which is red, asur, forbidden. You can't read by them. So he says, you know why? Probably also this one he left out because it's also in the same category as excrement, which has a bad smell. And even though he wrote, right, that regarding the urine of the animals, mutar, that it's allowed, and didn't differentiate between donkeys and other animals, there is to say that since he revealed to us that the main issue, right, is if you have excrement which has a bad smell, asur mina, that's forbidden, minan delef. So then from there we learn that the animals, the urine of the animals is allowed because they don't have bad smell. Dafka. That's only if they don't have bad smell. Okay, so there you go, right? So in other words, pretty much he's trying to tell you, right, Maran over here, something interesting, right? That all the questions they had on the Rambam, these Rishonim, you can answer all of them. In other words, the words of the Rambam stand. Right? They stand tall. You can't knock them down. So that's what he's trying to say. He's defending the Rambam. Okay, there you go. By the way, you know, there's always a question, like when a lot of people read, you know, these passages from the Bet Yosef, right? These kinds of passages, sometimes, you know, you kind of like ask yourself a question, you know, like, how did Bet Yosef know that the Rambam meant it this way? Like, there's also other ways to interpret it, you know what I mean? So how do you know all these things? You know, the truth is, you know, I think I told one of my friends, right, that what happened was that there was one rabbi in the generation of Maran. There was a rabbi, his name was the Maharshal, Rabbi Shlomo Luria. So he was living in Poland, you know, he was a cousin of the Ramah. They were cousins, right? So he was from the family of the Arizal, which is also Luria, of Yitzchak Luria, right? So anyway, right, this Maharshal, what happened was that they brought to him the Bet Yosef, you know, after Maran wrote the Bet Yosef. They brought it to him, you know. He was a big gaon, he was a big scholar, this guy. So they showed it to him, and he read through it, you know, and he didn't like it, the Bet Yosef. So the reason he didn't like it was because he said, you know, it seems like, this rabbi just like, he does like guesswork over here, like he guesses what the Rambam meant. How does he know? Like there's no logical way to figure these things out. How would you know that the Rambam meant this way, like that? It's like magic. What are you, magician? So therefore he said, right, that these are like, he says the Bet Yosef is a bunch of guesswork. This is what he said, The truth is that, you can say like, maybe he was being malicious, this rabbi, but he was not. He was not being malicious. He meant it very, very, very truthfully. In other words, according to what he knew as a scholar, this is not the proper way to learn. You can't do guesswork when it comes to Torah. But there's, as I told one of my friends, right, there was one piece of information that he was missing, this rabbi, and that's why he said what he said. You know what he didn't know? Anybody know? So the truth is,
the Magid.
I'm sorry?
The Magid?
Yeah, exactly, right? As you said, right? So I'll explain to him what that means, right? That Maran, when he was writing these works, the Bet Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch and the Kesef Mishnah, he had this angel, his name was Magid. And he was helping him to write these works, you know what I mean? That's why a lot of people say, by the way, it's a big machloket, by the way, this whole thing, It's a big dispute. Some say that Bet Yosef was written with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, like prophecy, And by the way, that's how they tried to answer the question of the Marshal, because the Marshal said, this is guesswork, right? What's going on with that? Right? So some say, no, what guesswork? It's Ruach HaKodesh. What are you talking about? Divinely inspired, right? But what the problem with that is, right? You can't say that because lo b'shamayim here, right? We can't learn halachot from the heavens. Once Moshe Rabbeinu got the whole Torah, we can't anymore get from the heaven, right? Halachot. Lo b'shamayim here, right? Now the rabbis have to figure out the halachot over here. That's the way it is, There's no more gifts from heaven anymore, right? Nothing falls down from there anymore, right? Except acid rain, maybe, right? All kinds of stuff, right? But you don't get any new halachot from heaven, right? So the thing is like this, lo b'shamayim hi. So therefore, right, the Maran, the Rav Ovadia, he writes in several places, the ones who say that Bet Yosef is Ruach HaKodesh, this is technically wrong because halacha is not prophecy, you know what I mean? It has to be judged. It has to be done by the judgment of the rabbis. It has to be human judgment there. It can't be from heaven, rain from heaven. It can't be like that. So, but the truth is, right, that what happened was that this. So then, how do we answer this? Right, this whole contradiction here, right? This whole to reconcile the whole thing. The way it works is like this: there's a right. The Maran, when he had this Magid, right, this angel that was helping him to write these books, he wrote a book, by the way, like he tells you there how this was going on, the whole thing, the dialogue that was going on between them, the angel and Maran, this, right, there was a whole dialogue going on there. So then how can it be, right, if the angel was giving him the information, so then it's like prophecy, so that's not allowed. You can't do halacha that way. So then, how was it? How did that happen? You understand the question? So the answer is like this, right? If you look at the dialogue that was going on there, the way it was going on is like this, right? It's not that this angel was telling Maran what to write and what not to write. In other words, okay, this is right. God, so thus says the Lord, right? Neum Adonai, right? It's not like that. There was no prophecy there. What happened was that Maran was doing the work, you know what I mean? And then the Magid, this angel, would come, and he would tell Maran, he would tell him, oh, okay, I see. You wrote here 2 answers to this question. He told him, he says, the first answer is really wrong. But he says, you tell him like this, even though the first answer is wrong, Hashem really likes your thinking. In other words, he likes your answer, like, in other words, it's a nice piece of Torah. The lumdus is good there, you know what I mean? Nice piece of Torah, but it's not really correct though. Bottom line, right? So he would tell him, listen, the second answer is the good one. right? So that's what he would do. You understand? That's how he guided Maran. He wouldn't tell him what to write, but he would tell him like this, okay, what you wrote is like wrong here. So in other words, do it again, or like whatever, try again, give it another shot. So what happened was in the end, right, that because of this, that the angel was guiding him, Maran was able to figure out things, that the human mind can't figure out. This was divinely inspired, in one sense. Yes and no, right, as we said, right? Yes and no. So because of that, that's why you find, in the Bet Yosef, many things, he tells you, oh, the Rambam meant like this, he meant like that. How do you know? Nobody could know these things. How would you know these things? How did you figure it out? What are you, a magician? But no, but he had the Magid, he had the angel who was helping him. So therefore, this is the reason why many of the Achronim, the later authorities, they say, that's why we have no permission to argue with the Shulchan Aruch. We have no permission to argue with the Bet Yosef. Because even though it doesn't make sense to you, but this was already, went through the litmus test, of the Magid, so don't play games with the Bet Yosef, with his conclusions and say, no, I think it's like different, I have a different way of looking at it. Yeah, do you really, like, what, do you really think and that's what the Chazon Ish used to say, Allah Shalom, who was one of the big poskim of the last 100 years, right? He used to say, Chazon Ish, he would say, whoever argues on Maran, Shulchan Aruch, he says, you should know, you can argue you can do what you want, but he says, you should know, you're also arguing with the Magid, the angel that was with him, so you're also arguing on that. Not such a good idea to do things like that, so watch out, that's why, the Chazon Ish used to say, I was taught by my rabbis, he said, that we don't argue with the Shulchan Aruch. That's not a really smart thing to do, But the truth is that when it comes to the authorities that came after Maran, like one generation later, like the Magen Avraham, the Taz, the Shach, right, the Bach, and the Pri Chadash, right? They did argue with Maran. So how did they? And also the Gra, right? How did they argue with Maran? Right? Apparently, they didn't realize, that this angel thing was going on there. Because if they knew that, they probably wouldn't have argued. But anyway, it's all Torah. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. When it comes to halacha, bottom line is that we go like the Shulchan Aruch, we go like the Bet Yosef, we go like the Kesef Mishnah, because these books were written by divine inspiration in the sense that there was an angel that was guiding him. You can't beat that. There's no way to beat that. Like there was one kid in yeshiva. One time he told people. He says, what's the big deal? Shulchan Aruch. There's many rabbis. It's only one vote, What? It's not one vote. That's the bottom line in halakha, So don't try to play games with that. Don't play games with Shulchan Aruch. Okay, whatever. God bless, right? Whatever it is, right? So anyway, right? We'll let's see. I guess the Shulchan Aruch here we have to see, right? Which ones? We have to see, right? Hey and Vav. Okay. Looks like Vav has a different piece here. Let's see what it has. Probably something in the end. Right, there's also another here thing for Vav. It says here in Yerushalmi, right? Aminan the marchikim mitzvot tarnagolim da'alamot. It says over there again, right, that we have to distance from the excrement of chickens 4 amot. We watch da'adumim, but it says only red chickens, right? Go figure. When it's tapakua Tosfot, the Sot Perek mentioned that too, right? So Tosfot has a doubt about this. The Perusho, right? What does this mean, right? Verashba katab denireh lo tarnagolim adumim. In other words, there's 2 ways to interpret this, right? Are the chickens red or is the excrement red, right? That Tosfot had a doubt about which one it's talking about. So Rashba says we're talking about the chickens, for God's sakes. What came first, right? The chicken or the egg, right? Whatever came first, the chicken or the excrement. So here, Rashba says it's red chickens, right? Kamar. Oh, so Rashba says, how do I know that it's talking about the chickens and not the excrement, right? Because if it was talking about the excrement, it would say aduma, right? In other words, in a feminine form, right? You guys that are learning Hebrew, right? You should know these things now. right? You should be learning these things. Also, it's singular, right? Singular feminine. So it's going after the chicken, right? Not going after the tzoah. Tzoah is singular and feminine. So says the Rashba, you see from there, it's talking about the chickens. Right? There you go, right? The wisdom of the Rashba, right? Okay, there you go. So, right? But it says, nevertheless, he says, right? There is some kind of tradition, that what? In other words, according to Tosfot, it seems like Tosfot knew. Why did they have a doubt about this, right? What, they didn't know Hebrew grammar, right? What was their doubt? So therefore, it says the Rashba, the doubt was that they also had a tradition, that red excrement has a bad smell. So they weren't sure which one is talking about. Okay, there you go, right? About Rabbeinu Yonah, but it says Rabbeinu Yonah, right? Piresh, the Betzoah Duma Kamar. He says, no, it's talking about red excrement, right? Argues with Rashba. That's very smelly, right? Oof. So it says, man, what's the halacha? Bottom line, right? We go like the Rambam, right? That's the way I explain his words, he says. Okay, very nice. So that would probably mean that we go lenient, but let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we'll see what he says there. And we'll stop there. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Tzot Chamor Araka. So if you have the excrement of the donkey, right, which is soft, after it came from the road, but also the cat and the weasel, right, and also the rotting carcass, right, so they're like a human excrement, same thing. So it says if a person is going on the road, even if he sees, right, even though he sees in front of him, right, the excrement of the humans, if the smell doesn't come to him, he doesn't have to be careful. Right? In the minority, the tlota b'shel chamor. So what does that mean? He doesn't have to be careful that maybe it's from a donkey. They have to be more careful about that. But samuch le'ir says if it's close to the city, yesh omrim sheyesh lachush. There we have to be more careful. Because most of the animals which are next to the city, right? Hem chamorim, they're animals, they're donkeys, right? So says the Rama, it's only in a place where donkeys are frequent, right? Today we don't have a situation like this, right? Unless you go to the country somewhere, right? We don't have donkeys, we don't have anything like that. So we don't have to be really careful about this. So therefore, right, the rule is if you see, right, if you're going on the road and you see excrement, right, on the way, as long as you don't smell it, you can read. Why is that? Because we assume that it comes from animals, Why would you assume that it comes from donkeys? You know what I mean? It's a very, very small, thin chance of something like that. Especially nowadays. Okay, so that's that. And then we have one more here. Vav. It says in Vav, Yerushalmi oseh likot keneged be'raglei chamor. Haba min haderech. So Yerushalmi says also something else, right? That also if there's urine from a donkey which came from the road, also the excrement of the chickens, right? Aduma, which is what? So it says aduma. So it seems like he's going on the excrement, right? More than the chickens. Because it says aduma, which is going on the feminine form of the singular form of the tzoah. Okay, very good. Now you know, right? You know which chickens to stay away from. There you go, right? You're all set now, right? So be careful with those chickens in your yard. Actually, in Rigo Park here, we have some chickens. There are some people here who grow chickens. We hear them sometimes in the morning. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop there. Chazak Baruch, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth, happiness, health, happiness, all the good things. And always you should have a good smelling place, B'ezras Hashem, so you can learn Torah and pray in cleanliness. As they say, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? As they say, right? It says that somewhere. I'll tell you about that next time, B'ezras Hashem. Okay, so Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you Sunday night with Hashem. And be healthy and happy, but be holy. Chazak Baruch.
Amen. Kavod harav. Thank
All
you.
the best.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you so much.